Have you ever had to make a tough decision? Life is really filled with them. When you're younger, it's questions like, should I go to this school or that school? And when I get there, should I major in this or should I major in this other thing? And then it becomes, should I get married or should I stay single? Should I buy this house in this neighborhood or should I look at this other neighborhood? Should I take this job or that job? Should I stay in the job I have now or should I look for something else? And then eventually it becomes, should I retire this year or hang on for a couple more years? Should I downsize or should I stay in the house I've got? And you know how the questions go. There are these decisions that come up that you have to decide which path you're going to take because they have these ripple effects that affect almost every area of our lives. There's another area where a lot of us have a hard time making a decision, and it's become sort of acute the last 4 or 5 years, especially the last couple years, and that's this whole area of what we choose to watch on television. Now, some of you can remember when that wasn't much of a choice because you just had 3 options. You come in after a long day at work and you sit on the couch and it's NBC, ABC, or CBS, and that's it. But today, it's not that way. Today, because of all the different streaming services like Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus, you literally have thousands of options every time you sit on your couch and turn on your television. I read this week, Netflix alone has over 15,000 titles you can choose from. If you add in Disney Plus, that's another 8,000 titles. And so what happens is for a lot of people, almost on a nightly basis, they experience what's called analysis paralysis. You sit down, you grab the remote, and you have a decision to make. Should I watch this show or that show? Should I go back and watch a movie that I really like, or should I look for something new, or should I check out that show that everybody else is talking about? According to the streaming companies, it takes the average person 7 minutes and 40 seconds to decide what they're going to watch once they log into their account. Now, keep in mind, that might not sound too bad because some of you, we've all done this. You look up and you spent 30 minutes trying to decide which 30-minute program you're going to watch. But 7 minutes and 40 seconds doesn't sound that bad. But over the course of a year, if you add it all together, that's 45 hours the average person spends just trying to decide what they're going to watch. Something else I thought was interesting. According to Netflix, 21% of the people who log into their account get so overwhelmed trying to figure out what to watch that they never actually watch anything. They eventually get tired of looking and they log out and they go and do something else without ever watching the first minute of the first program. So in order to sort of combat this, a couple weeks ago, Netflix released a new feature. You may have seen this. I got a picture that I want to share with you. Some of you have seen this. It's the play something button. So you log into your account and you can hit this play something button, and that way you don't have any decisions to make at all. Netflix will take your past viewing habits into account. They've got this algorithm, and I don't understand it, but all I know is you hit the button and they start playing something that they think you're going to like. Now, when I first saw that, I had 2 thoughts. Number one, I thought, I wonder if this is how civilization ends. Like, not only have we now gotten too lazy to get up and change the channel, now we're too lazy to even decide what we're going to watch. The other thought I had, though, was I wonder how that 45 hours a year that all of us spend just trying to decide what to watch, I wonder how that 45 hours a year compares to the time we spend doing the things that really matter. See, I'm convinced that a lot of us, we've sort of got this do something button instead of a play something. So you pull out your calendar and you got your schedule and you're doing a bunch of stuff, right? You're here and you're there and you're doing this thing and you're involved in this. And we're doing all this stuff, but it's all sort of random. There's no real plan. There's no real focus. We're not really heading in any particular direction. So the schedule's full. The calendar's full and the to-do list continues to grow longer. But in the middle of the night when you can't sleep, you still wonder, am I accomplishing anything that matters? If you have your Bible, I want you to turn to Mark chapter 6. For the last few weeks, we've been looking at some things that Jesus modeled for us when it comes to our relationships with the people closest to us. So last week, for example, we looked at this problem that all of us deal with of being too distant. And at the end of that message, I gave you 3 what I thought were really practical ideas for how to combat that. So we talked about this idea of having a daily conversation doing some sort of weekly, activity, and then some sort of monthly event. Just 3 ways that you pull back from all the other stuff, and you just, you spend some time with the people closest to you, away from the ordinary routine. And all those things can be helpful. I hope you're doing some of them, but there's a challenge in all of that, and some of you felt it as soon as I said it last week, and I know you did because I feel it too. And it's this idea of, hey, that sounds great. I'd love to have a daily conversation. I'd love to plan some sort of weekly activity. I'd love to have some sort of monthly event with the people I'm closest to. But how in the world am I supposed to squeeze that in when I've already got all this other stuff I'm doing? Most of us hear that and it sounds cool and we think it would work. It's just we don't see how we can build that into something that's already overflowing. And I get that because I feel it too. But what if the answer was not to keep adding stuff and create a busier calendar or a busier life, but to reevaluate some stuff and maybe create a better life? Before we get to Mark 6, there's one verse from Psalm 90 that I want to show you. It was the only psalm written by Moses. Remember Moses, the guy that led the Israelites out of the Egyptian slavery? If you haven't read Exodus in a while, there's a movie starring Russell Crowe. That's Moses. He's a guy, he's got this entire nation of people who are looking to him for the answers. They want him to answer all their questions, solve all their problems, and lead them into a better future. I mean, it's hard for us to imagine the pressure that Moses was living under. You get to Psalm 90, he's looking back over his life, talking about some of the things he's learned. I want you to look at this prayer. He says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Did you know that your life is going to be a certain number of days? No matter what you do, it's going to come to an end. There's going to be and then we all have this finite, number of days that we're dealing with. And Moses said that there's something about realizing that. There's something about knowing that you've got this limited amount of time that's going to be your life that helps you make or should help you make better decisions about how you're going to spend that limited time. See, the real issue is not that you have limited time, because everybody's got limited time. I mean, we've all got the same number of hours in a day. We've all got the same numbers of hours in a week. And we've all got this certain amount of time that we're dealing with that will be our life. Someday there's going to be a tombstone. It's going to have your birthday and the date of your death. It's going to be very compact, very limited. It's going to go very fast. And Moses said there's something about knowing that changes the way you spend your time. So here's the key principle I want you to take with you this week. It's knowing that my time is limited helps me limit how I'm going to spend my time. When I realize there's an end in sight, it's going to help me make better decisions, or it should help me make better decisions about how I'm going to spend the time that I do have. Now, we get that when it comes to money. We've all been there. We're trying to make a budget, make sure every dollar is accounted for. But for some reason, most of us like to act, we like to live as if we've just got unlimited amounts of time. Or we like to live as if somehow in the future they're going to figure out a way for us to add days to our life. But that's never going to happen. And so rather than carefully planning how we spend our days, most of us just sort of keep adding more and more to the schedule. And maybe they're all good things. I mean, maybe everything you're involved in is great. Maybe you volunteer at your kid's school and you work your job and you make blankets for the homeless and you serve at the soup kitchen and you lead Bible studies, when you're not doing that. Maybe everything you're doing is awesome. Maybe it's all really good work. But here's the problem. Even being involved in good things can unintentionally pull you away from the best things. And I don't know how it's been for you, but for me, especially in recent weeks, feels like the pace is starting to pick back up. The vacations are getting scheduled. The travel teams are, right in the middle of their seasons. The summertime's coming. You think, well, it's going to be a little less stressful, but that's not true. You got to go here and you got to go there and you got to do this and you got to be a part of that. And if you're not really careful, all of us will get involved in all of these different things without ever stopping to take the time of thinking through why we're doing all that we're doing. But what if it wasn't that way? What if instead of just a bunch of random stuff, we actually had a plan? What if instead of just saying yes to all this stuff, we thought through about where we're going and why we're going there, and we started to take away from some things that are pulling us away from some better things. Last weekend, if you were here, We were in Mark chapter 3. We looked at this story in which Jesus chooses the 12 men that would essentially function as his family over this 3-year period that we call his public ministry. And one of the things you'll notice as you read through Mark, if you ever read through it, is that Mark moves really quick in the narrative. He uses the word immediately over 40 times in just 16 chapters. So the picture you get is that Jesus and his disciples were rarely standing still. They were always moving forward. They were always trying to advance the kingdom. They were always on the go. And when you get to Mark chapter 6, Jesus and his disciples they're traveling around, they're doing what they always do. And that's when Jesus decides to do something different. For the very first time, instead of traveling around as one larger group, he breaks them up into groups of 2. So you got 6 groups of 2 now traveling instead of one larger group, and they're going to all these different places, and they're performing miracles, and they're preaching sermons, and they're doing their best to advance the kingdom. When you get to verse 30 of Mark chapter 6, and they've now come back. We don't know how long they were gone, but here's what we do know. If you ever had a kid that went away to college and they've come back after their first semester, this is what this is. Jesus wants to hear about what they've done. They want to share their stories. They want to talk about their experiences, but they've got a problem that emerges in the middle of this. Mark chapter 6, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." You ever been so busy that you didn't have time to eat? Has your family ever felt like it was pulled in so many different directions that you couldn't even find time to share a meal together? This kid's got a game at 5 over here, and this kid's got another game at 6:30 somewhere else, and there's dance practice, and then there's story time and bedtime and homework time and shower time, and there's not even a spare moment. I mean, you can't even hardly catch a breath, much less sit down around a table together. So here's what happens. We get a number 3 combo, from Wednesdays, and we're eating in the back of the car, and we're going from here to there, and we're watching the clock, and we're trying to get to wherever it is we're supposed to be going. That's what Jesus and his disciples were experiencing. They were in a situation they couldn't even look up. I mean, everywhere they look, there are these people that want stuff from them. So that's when Jesus does something that's a model for the rest of us. He looks at his closest friends, these guys that have now been with him for several months and who he's hoping will be with him for several years, and he sees they're exhausted. They're physically exhausted, they're spiritually exhausted, they're emotionally exhausted. And so rather than pushing them back out towards the crowds, rather than telling them to re-engage with the people who are waiting on them, he does something. It's a great model for us, and he gives them permission to pull back. And he invites them to disengage from all the craziness that's going on around them and go to a quiet place where they can rest. Now, as you look at this passage, there are 3 questions that emerge that can help us. So if you're keeping notes, you can do them on the app or the bulletin or whatever you want to do. 3 questions that you can ask that will help you make better decisions about how you spend your time. Because here's what happens. Every time you decide I'm going to do better, there are these conflicts that arise. And you don't know, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I say yes to this? I mean, there's all these inevitable conflicts. So here's just 3 questions that you can learn to ask on a regular basis that can help all of us do better. Here's the first one. You need to ask yourself, am I taking time to rest? Am I taking time to pull back from all the craziness that surrounds me and really rest? Back in 2017, researchers from Oxford University published a multi-year study in which they concluded that busyness has become sort of a badge of honor in our modern world. You ask most people, hey, how you doing? They'll either say tired or busy or tired and busy or busy and tired or some combination of those things. And the reason we do that is all of us at some level have bought into this idea that, if I'm busy, that means I'm valuable. And the busier I am, the more valuable I am. So in the opening paragraph of this study, they cited a commercial that some of you remember. It won a lot of awards back in 2014. Was a Super Bowl commercial from the luxury car company Cadillac. I've got a screenshot taken from the actual commercial. You see this sort of wealthy looking guy, he's wearing a suit, and he's standing next to this luxury car. And as the commercial opens, what you can see is the car is parked next to a really impressive swimming pool, which is located outside of his really impressive and even more impressive mansion. So that's kind of the picture you get. As the commercial opens, this guy, he looks into the camera and he says this. He said, in other countries, they work, they stroll home, they stop by the cafe, they take August off, completely off. Why aren't you like that? Why aren't we like that? And then the camera pans out and it shows you the swimming pool and the other cars and the mansion. And then the camera draws back in close and this guy answers his own question and he says, do we do it for the stuff? No. We do it because we're crazy, driven, hardworking believers. And then he ends with, you work hard, create your own luck, and believe that anything is possible. And the implication is, hey, if you just work hard enough and you do the right stuff, hey, one day you'll have a luxury Cadillac and you'll have a swimming pool and you'll live in a mansion. Now, in our hearts, we know that's silly. We know that. But if you look at your schedule, you look at your calendar, it's very likely you've bought into that more than you even realize. For most of us, we spend our lives, we're chasing after this elusive sort of undefined goal that we've never even really thought about. We're really not even sure where we're going or what we're chasing after, but we're going after it hard. I listened to a podcast this week where they interviewed Adam Vinatieri, played 24 years in the NFL, Hall of Fame career, won several Super Bowls. He's talking about his career path. He talked about when he first came in the NFL, his dream was to have $2 million in the bank. So if I can have $2 million, then I'll be happy the rest of my life, set my family up. It'll be great. So sure enough, he made $2 million. Then he got to thinking, you know what would be better than $2 million? $4 million. So sure enough, a year later, $4 million. Gets $4 million. You know what would be better than $4 million? $8 million. And then he got $8 million. You know what would be better than that? $16 million. Then he had $16 million. You know what would be better than that? $32 million. And the goalposts just kept moving. Chasing something. Not even really sure what you're chasing, but the goalpost just keeps moving. So now he's been in the league 24 years. He's a certain Hall of Famer, a net worth in the tens of millions, several Super Bowl rings, holds most of the records for place kickers in the NFL. And you know what he's doing? He's looking for his next team because he's not satisfied. That's what we do. We just keep chasing this stuff. We're not even sure what we're chasing. But that's not what Jesus did. Jesus modeled for us a better way. In fact, he does the opposite in this passage of what most of us would have done. You look up, you see this huge crowd. Hey, we got to strike while the iron's hot. These people are clamoring. We've got their attention. Now's the time to lean in, but that's not what he does. He pulls back. Instead of kicking it into high gear, he lowers them and he shifts down. He lowers the RPM. Jesus understood, hey, if you run an engine at max RPM for very long, eventually that engine's going to explode. That's what happens to human beings too. You go full speed for very long, eventually you're going to have a crash. But here's what I want you to notice about this. The people were still there. Like the phone was still ringing, right? The demands were still there. The email inbox was still filling out. People were still clamoring for his attention. So Jesus knew, hey, if this is going to go off the rails, if we're going to keep this from going off the rails, we've got to do something different. So Jesus did not make the mistake that a lot of us make. He did not wait for the schedule to clear up. That's what we do. And so we say silly things like, well, you know, I'm in a really busy season. And when things slow down, I'm going to get around to doing what matters most. The problem is the season never slows down. It just keeps increasing in speed. It just keeps getting busier. So rather than extending the busy season, Jesus chose to slow down. He didn't wait for the schedule to clear off. He cleared it off himself. And one of the things that you and I need to learn to do, when you look at your calendar, when you decide what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, you have to ask yourself, am I taking adequate time to lower the RPMs? Am I taking time to shift gears and rest? And if you're not, it's a good indication you need to make some changes. Now here's a second question you need to ask, and it's the question, am I investing in the people closest to me? Check out what happens in verse 32. So they went by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. If you got your Bible with you or your app or whatever you use, I want you to circle or underline those two words, by themselves. Then I want you to ask yourself, how much time do I spend intentionally investing in the people closest to me? And just to help you figure this out, I'm not trying to be mean, but let me just help you. Riding in the car somewhere in between events is not investing in people. You sitting on the sideline watching your kid play ball is not investing in them. You sitting in the living room arguing over what you're going to watch on Netflix, that's not intentionally investing. What I'm talking about is you pull away from all of that stuff, all the teammates, all the demands, all the screens, and you just say, hey, can we talk about some stuff that really matters? Now, I know we're all tired of hearing about the Center for Disease Control, but 2 years ago, the CDC completed a 2-year study. They followed around 32,000 individuals and documented the way they spend their time. People from different ages, people from different stages of life. And the question was, how much free time does the average person have in a normal day? So for the purposes of their study, they identified free time as time that was not spent working, not taking classes, not taking care of your kids or taking care of your house, or what they called self-care, which is like sleeping and showering and grooming and all the stuff that you have to do. Whatever was left, though, that was your free time. So basically anything that you chose to do that you didn't have to do, that's your free time. At the end of those 2 years, they determined that the average American has 5 hours a day of free time. For women, it was 4 hours and 18 minutes. And for men, it was 5 hours and 56 minutes. So if you feel like the men in your life have more free time than you do, just want you to know you're right. The question then became, what is it that we do with that free time? If everybody's got, give or take 5 hours, what is it that we do? And the answer, unsurprisingly, is that we spend most of that time staring at screens. iPad screens, TV screens, phone screens, movie screens. According to the CDC, the average woman spends 2 hours and 55 minutes of her 5 hours a day looking at a screen, and the average man spends 3 hours and 31 minutes looking at a screen. Now, here's what some of you think. I know, because I think the same thing. You think, well, that's just the average. And I wish I had 5 hours of free time because, I'm much busier than the average person. That might be true of other people, but I'm much busier because I'm much more valuable than the average person. But throughout their study, here's what they discovered. While there might be exceptions to that on occasion, like on certain days, they could not find one subgroup of people who averaged less than 4.5 hours of free time on a normal day. Nobody averaged less than 4.5. Now, here's the question. What if you and I could figure out a way to just take 30 minutes out of that? You don't have to spend the whole time. I'm just saying, if you just took 30 minutes of a day, 30 minutes, 10% of the free time that you already have, and you just chose to invest that in the relationships with your kids and the people closest to you. I'm not saying you have to do it all. I'm not asking you to do the impossible. I'm just saying, if you took just 10% of the free time that you already have and invested that, what kind of return on your investment do you think you'd experience? If you could somehow find a way to do it, just 30 minutes every day over the course of a year, that would be 182 hours. That's more than most people work in a month. You could take a whole month of your work life and use the equivalent of that and invest it in the people closest to you. Imagine the conversations that could take place. Imagine the stories and the lessons that could be handed down. Think about the mistakes that you've made that you can help other people avoid if you would just tell them your story. Think about the wrong turns and the crash landings that could all be avoided if we just took 10% of the time that we already have free and we used it to do something that mattered. That's what Jesus did. No matter how busy he was, no matter how many people were making demands on him, He pulled back from all of that on a routine basis, and he spent that time investing himself, pouring himself into the people who were closest to him. One more question. It's the question, am I serving other people? Just like some of you, Jesus had a hard time escaping the demands of the crowds. And so he's got this constant pressure that he lives with. And so what happens here is that they get in this boat and they're trying to escape the crowds, but apparently there's some headwinds that are making it sort of slow progress. So by the time they cover the distance across this lake, the people on the shore have already figured out where they're going, and they beat them to the spot. So rather than escaping the crowds, all they've done is they've given the crowds a chance to regroup and regather. But rather than getting angry about that, I want you to listen to what Jesus does. Mark chapter 6, verse 33. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. If you keep reading your Bible, you'll notice the next paragraph is where Jesus does the miracle that everybody, even people who don't go to church know about, the feeding of the 5,000. But what I want you to notice is why Jesus did that. Verse 34, Mark tells us he sees this huge crowd of people, and they're lost, and they're lonely, and they're uncertain, and they're hurting, and they're depressed, and they're looking to him for answers. And it says that he had compassion on them. And so he took the opportunity to serve them. And every single day, you and I have the same opportunity. People you work with, people that live in your neighborhood, people whose kids play on the same team that your kids play on. And they're searching, man, they're looking for hope and for purpose and for meaning and for somebody, for anybody to point them in the right direction. And you can do that and I can do that. The problem is we've convinced ourselves that we're too busy to even try. Or even worse, we've convinced ourselves that we're too distracted to even notice. And I want you to imagine for just a second the impact you could have on the people around you if you just had the time. I've got a picture that I want to show you. I want you to take a good look at this. Some of you may have seen this lady on the news a couple weeks ago. Her name is Hester Ford. She passed away on April the 17th, and according to the New York Times, at the time of her passing, she was the oldest living person in the United States. Her family thought she was 115. But when they went to record her death, they realized that the state of North Carolina had her down as being born in August of 1904 instead of August of 1905, which would make her 116 instead of 115. And last I read, they're still trying to figure out which one is right. But regardless, she had an incredible run. You think about that kind of longevity. She experienced just an incredible life. According to the article I read, she had 12 children of her own, followed by 68 grandchildren, 125 great-grandchildren, and 120 great-great-grandchildren. And after that, they just stopped counting because it was overwhelming. In addition to all that, she lived through 21 presidents, the Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression, 2 world wars, 2 pandemics, the Jim Crow era followed by the Civil Rights Movement, and more changes in technology and stuff than most of us could ever imagine. Maybe most impressive of all, she lived on her own without any assistance until the age of 108 when she fell and broke her hip and limited her mobility, so her friends and family had to start taking care of her. She was first profiled nationally back in, I forget what year it was, but she turned 111. NPR had her on, did a big feature about her. And since then, she's sort of been a common interview subject. People would go to North Carolina and interview her and ask her questions and write articles about her each year as the clock ticked, and she added another year of life. And she's been interviewed multiple times. You go back, and I read several of them over the last week, and you should do the same thing. But in every interview, they'd always ask her, hey, what's the secret to your long life? And in every interview, she and her family would point out, there's really no secret. She does not follow a strict diet. She eats whatever she wants to eat. She never exercised regularly. no medication. I mean, there's nothing you could point to. The only thing they mention in a few of the articles is that she eats half a banana a day and listens to gospel music. So if you're looking to, add years to your life, go get some bananas and turn on K-Loves. All I can tell you. That's the thing. The other thing she mentioned, though, in every single interview was how fast her life went by. 115, maybe 116. And she said it went like that. And she's not alone in that. Dr. Kent Pillmeyer is a professor of sociology at Cornell University. Spent several years interviewing people, 1,500 people, ages 70 to 100. And he asked them about the most important things they'd learned about life. In 2011, he wrote a great book. It's titled 30 Lessons for Living, Tried and True Advice from the Wisest Americans. 1,500 people. You know what the number one thing every single person mentioned was? Let me read you from the book. This is from Dr. Pillmeyer. He said the number one lesson endorsed by nearly all 1,500 people, and the one in which people were most vehement, is life is short. Or really short. Or life is really, really short. Or as one ex-engineer said, it passes by in a nanosecond. He then quoted one lady in the book. He interviewed her, 99 years old. Here's what she said. I can't believe how quickly it passed. I don't know what happened. One day you're a little girl and the next day you're 100. And it goes like that. Now some of you hear that and you know exactly what they're talking about. You may not be near 100, but you look back over your life and you think, I cannot believe how fast this thing is gone. And the worst part of all, you talk to an older person, it just keeps speeding up. It's not slowing down. James chapter 4, James said our lives are like a mist. I mean, you're here and then you're gone, man. You're like the morning fog. And here's the deal. If you know that, it only makes sense that you do your best to use the time you have to do what matters most. See, I don't want to waste my life, the precious few years I have left. If it's a few years, because nobody's promised tomorrow, but whatever time I've got left, I don't want to waste it doing stuff that doesn't matter. And that's what a lot of people do. A lot of people get to the end of their life and they ask the question, did I accomplish anything? And the answer is no. You watched a lot of TV, went to a lot of ball games, but you didn't really accomplish anything. Now, deep down inside, I don't want to do that. And you don't want to do that either. So I want to encourage you, make some hard decisions. Make some decisions that are much more important than what you're going to watch that night on television, and if you're going to take this job or that job, and what house you're going to live in, and what car you're going to drive in. And you may have to make some decisions to let go of some good things so that you can spend some time doing some better things. And if you do that long enough, the hope is eventually you'll start to experience some of the best things. I want you to stay with me. We're going to have just a brief invitation. Earlier, Reagan doesn't know this, but earlier we sang that last song we did, How Marvelous, was one of my grandma's favorite songs. And I was thinking about her a lot this week, and a lot of different reasons for that. But she was a lady who spent her limited time, I think, very well. And there comes a point in your life, and she got there, and some of you are getting there too. There comes a point where you've got like more friends in heaven than you have here. You know what I mean? And you've got, you look up, and a lot of people that you're looking forward to seeing there in heaven, and the people you were close to. And I just want to encourage you. And I'm not trying to beat you up, because I wouldn't do that. But just because you've got friends in heaven doesn't mean you're going to heaven. And just because your dad's in heaven or your grandma's in heaven or your uncle's in heaven that you loved, that doesn't mean you get to go. It's not about what they did. It's about what you're doing. So I want to encourage you, if you know that your time's limited, there's two things that make sense. Number one, I'm going to use the time I have in the best way I can. And if I know there's an end in sight, I'm going to prepare for that end. We're going to close. We're going to sing this last song. There's a line that's in this song. You've sung it before. The goodness, your goodness is running after me. If you look at what the Bible says, God the Father is not just waiting in heaven, waiting for us to come to Him. He's actively pursuing us. He's chasing after us. But the problem is, while He's chasing after us, a lot of us are chasing after a lot of other stuff. And it could be that even right now, even right before noon on a Sunday, that this would be a good chance for you to slow down and allow Him to catch you. Would you sing with us?